The crisis of trust when crime data becomes unreliable. On December 31st, 2025, Washington, D.C.'s police chief walked out of headquarters for the last time, leaving behind a department whose crime statistics had been called likely unreliable and inaccurate by the United States Department of Justice. For 2.5 years, residents of the nation's capital made decisions based on crime data that federal investigators say was systematically manipulated. Where to live, where to walk at night, whether a neighborhood was getting safer or more dangerous. When that information becomes unreliable, residents cannot assess risk properly. Property values reflect false perceptions. Resources get allocated to the wrong places. Federal investigations found that a culture of fear inside the Metropolitan Police Department may have incentivized the misclassification of crimes, making the city appear safer on paper than it was in reality. Washington, D.C. was experiencing a 26-year high in homicides when Pamela Smith became police chief in July 2023. The city recorded 274 murders that year, the highest number since 1997. With roughly 700,000 residents, that homicide rate was 6 times higher than New York City. Carjackings had nearly doubled. Armed robberies surged. Gun assaults peaked at 100 incidents. Mayor Muriel Bowser appointed Smith with clear expectations. She was expected to reverse these trends and drive crime down. Smith came with 27 years in law enforcement and became the first Black woman to permanently serve as D.C.'s police chief in November 2023. Warning signs started appearing within the department long before federal investigators arrived. Officers in Southeast Washington began keeping a list. Starting in March 2024, they documented instances where they believed crimes were being inappropriately classified. By the time federal investigators reviewed this list, it contained more than 150 entries from a single police district. Roughly 36 officers and detectives lodged complaints with the Justice Department by October 2025. The complaints centered on intermediate offenses. In 2024, the D.C. Council passed the Secure D.C. Act, creating new crime categories that fell between serious and minor crimes. These categories were not included in the public daily crime report that residents, journalists, and policymakers used to track crime trends. A shooting where no one was hit could be classified as assault with a dangerous weapon, a serious crime that appears in public data, or it could be classified as endangerment with a firearm, an intermediate offense that does not appear in public data. The classification choice directly determined what the public saw. On August 11, 2025, President Trump placed Washington, D.C.'s police department under federal control and deployed 800 National Guard troops to the Capitol. Within 2 weeks, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer launched a formal investigation into allegations that Chief Smith had deliberately manipulated crime data. Congressional investigators conducted transcribed interviews with all 7 commanders who led D.C.'s patrol districts. These commanders had between 16 and 27 years of policing experience. The testimony described a workplace environment centered on lowering publicly reported crime numbers. Commanders said they were required to attend briefing meetings on crime data twice a week with Chief Smith. Multiple commanders used the same words to describe those meetings: humiliating, denigrating, terrifying. One commander described what happened after 13 robberies occurred in their district. Commander E said he was basically admonished. He said he felt as if he had committed the robberies after he left, and that he literally felt like he had to swear he did not commit them. Another commander said Chief Smith told them she would rather they make something up than not have an answer to her questions. Commanders who presented rising crime numbers faced public humiliation. The environment, commanders said, was marked by fear, intimidation, threats, and retaliation. One commander recounted an instance when an executive assistant for Chief Smith called about a shooting in which nobody was hit. The assistant said it sounded like an endangerment with a firearm. The commander asked whether the assistant was asking or telling. He was then instructed to change the classification to an intermediate offense that would not appear in public crime data. The Department of Justice conducted its own parallel investigation, reviewing approximately 6,000 police reports and interviewing over 50 current and former Metropolitan Police Department officers. Of the 51 witnesses interviewed, 30 provided information suggesting coercive pressure to lower crime. 19 complained of low morale. 11 expressed explicit fear of retaliation. The Justice Department examined 191 reports for aggravated assaults. About 33% were misclassified. Reports labeled pending investigation were misclassified 68% of the time. The draft report concluded that the main contributing factor and reason for the misclassifications is a culture of coercive fear that emanates from Pamela A. Smith and some of her senior staff. The Justice Department concluded that District of Columbia police crime statistics were likely unreliable and inaccurate. Unreliable crime data affects decisions at every level. Residents use crime statistics to decide where to live, where to send their children to school, and which neighborhoods to avoid after dark. Real estate values reflect crime perceptions. Businesses use crime data to determine where to open or whether to stay. If the crime data is artificially lowered, those decisions are based on false information. Police departments use crime data to allocate resources. If one district's good numbers came from downgrading crimes, the real crime victims there are not getting the response they need. Policymakers use crime trends to evaluate which strategies work. If falling numbers came from a reclassification rather than actual crime reduction, the city is funding strategies based on false success metrics. On December 8, 2025, Chief Smith announced she would resign, saying she wanted to spend time with family. 6 days later, the House Oversight Committee released its 22-page report. Chairman Comer stated, "Every single person who lives, works, or visits the District of Columbia deserves a safe city. Yet it is now clear the American people were deliberately kept in the dark about the true crime rates in our nation's capital." On December 16, 2025, United States Attorney Jeanine Pirro stated, "After a review of almost 6,000 reports and the interview of over 50 witnesses, it is evident that a significant number of reports had been misclassified, making crime appear artificially lower than it was. The conduct," she added, "does not rise to the level of a criminal charge." On December 19, 2025, Smith delivered a speech at her walkout ceremony. "Never would I, never will I, ever compromise my integrity for a few crime numbers," she said. "Never would I compromise 28 years in law enforcement for a few folk who could not stand to be held accountable," she said. "And if I had to do it all over again, I would do it again." She then addressed her critics. "So, I'm going to the Bible when I say this to my haters. F you." Some gasped. "I forgive you," she added. Her last day as chief was December 31st, 2025. Crime did fall under Chief Smith's leadership. That part is not disputed. In 2023, DC recorded 274 homicides. In 2024, that number dropped to 187, a 32% decrease. By late December 2025, the city had recorded 125 homicides, a 31% decrease from 2024. Violent crime overall dropped 35% in 2024. Robberies fell 39%. Armed carjackings dropped 53%. Multiple independent data sources corroborated these trends. ShotSpotter gunfire detection showed declining gun violence. Hospital data on firearm injuries dropped 33%. Crime data expert Jeff Asher said, "Either all those independent sources are lying, or gun violence is falling fast in DC, matching national trends." The evidence suggests both occurred. Crime genuinely decreased. The independent data confirms it. But the extent of that decrease, as reported in official Metropolitan Police Department statistics, appears to have been artificially enhanced through systematic misclassification. This form of data manipulation is difficult to detect. It takes a real positive trend and exaggerates it. For DC residents, this creates a confusing reality. The city did get safer, but exactly how much safer remains unclear. On December 17, 2025, Mayor Bowser announced that Jeffrey Carroll would serve as interim police chief. Carroll was Smith's second-in-command and had been with MPD since 2002. He outlined steps to address concerns, including improved training on crime classification, stronger policy controls, and the creation of an audit team. But he faces a challenge. He was part of Smith's command staff during the alleged misclassifications. As of January 2026, investigations remain active. The House Oversight Committee continues seeking documents. A DC Council oversight hearing is scheduled for February 2026. The audit team has not yet begun operating. The training protocols have not been implemented. DC residents continue making decisions based on MPD crime data that 2 federal investigations concluded is likely unreliable and inaccurate. The Metropolitan Police Department still publishes its daily crime report. Residents still check it. Real estate agents still cite it. But a question now hovers over every data point. Can it be trusted? Trust. What happened in Washington, D.C. reveals how institutions can fail the public without an obvious catastrophe. Crime actually fell. The police chief was praised. The department continued to function. The breakdown was more subtle. The information system that residents depend on became corrupted. This creates a paralyzing uncertainty. Residents cannot ignore the data because it is the only systematic information available. But they cannot fully trust it either. They are left making decisions about where to live, where to walk, where to send their children, based on information they know might have been manipulated. Once that trust is damaged, it is difficult to rebuild. Even if reforms are implemented, residents will ask how long this was happening and how many years of data are compromised. The House Oversight Committee said that crime statistics remain at risk of manipulation even after Chief Smith's resignation. The systems that enabled the alleged misclassifications do not disappear automatically when leadership changes. For at least 2.5 years, Washington, D.C. residents were making decisions about their safety based on information that may not have told them the full truth about crime in their city. Once you cannot trust the numbers, you are left navigating not just crime in your city, but uncertainty about whether you can even accurately understand the risks you face. When institutions prioritize image over accuracy, they do not just damage their own credibility. They damage the public's ability to make informed decisions about their own lives. In a city where crime genuinely did improve, the good news became harder to believe because the numbers that should have proven it can no longer be trusted.